How neoliberalism hijacked modern spirituality and the non-dual remedy. If you have spent any time in the modern wellness, self-help, or spiritual scenes lately, you have probably noticed a subtle underlying theme. Everything is put back on you. You create your own reality. If it drains you, let it go. You don't owe anyone anything. Your outer world is just a mirror of your inner state. On the surface, this sounds like pure personal empowerment. It tells you that you hold the keys to your own peace. But if you look a little deeper, you start to notice the dark side of this hyper-self-reliance, isolation, burnout, emotional numbness, and a complete denial of real-world systemic issues. How did modern spirituality, a space meant for connection, healing, and truth, become an engine for hyper-individualism? To understand this, we have to look at a political and economic movement that took over the Western world decades ago: Neoliberalism. So, what is neoliberalism? To understand where spirituality went off the rails, we first need a clear definition of neoliberalism. Neoliberalism is a political and economic philosophy that gained massive global traction in the late 1970s and 1980s. At its core, it advocates for free market capitalism, deregulation, the privatization of public services, and, well, the scaling back of government social safety nets. On a cultural level, neoliberalism shifts social responsibility away from the collective and puts it entirely on the shoulders of the individual. Instead of viewing society as an interconnected community that takes care of its members, neoliberalism views human beings primarily as economic actors, individual units responsible for managing their own risks, their own success, their own health, and their own survival. If housing becomes unaffordable, or wages stagnate, or community infrastructure collapses, the neoliberal framework doesn't point to broken economic systems. It points to you. It tells you that you lack a success mindset, or that you aren't working hard enough. This is called psychologization, taking massive structural systemic problems and reframing them as personal internal failures. And right around the 1980s, as neoliberalism was rising, the modern self-help and spiritual industries exploded alongside it. They became a perfect mirror of this political shift. Spirituality was repackaged not as a collective ethical path, but as a private consumer-driven project of personal optimization. This brings us to one of the most profound spiritual philosophies in human history: non-duality. In Sanskrit, non-duality is called Advaita, which literally means not two. It points to the fundamental truth that there is no real separation between the observer and the observed, between the individual self and the rest of existence. True non-duality is the ultimate anti-individualism. It completely dissolves the premise that you are an isolated ego trapped inside a bag of skin, driving your own private life. However, when non-duality was imported into modern individualistic culture, it underwent a radical distortion. This modern adaptation is often called Neo-Advaita. Where traditional non-duality was a rigorous, lifelong discipline, Neo-Advaita stripped away all ethical preparation, community duty, and psychological integration, leaving behind a flattened, direct proclamation. There is no self, there is no choice. The world is just an illusion, and you are already enlightened. When filtered through a neoliberal lens, this distorted non-duality becomes the ultimate form of spiritual bypassing. If the external world is just a projection or a dream, then real-world suffering, economic inequality, and relational commitments don't matter. It allows people to reframe avoidant behavior as non-attachment, emotional numbness as inner calm, and political apathy as being beyond duality. the hyper-individualized ego uses non-dual language as a protective shield. I don't need anyone, nothing is real, and my only job is to protect my own vibration. So, how do we correct this? How do we find true empowerment without falling into cold detachment or ignoring the realities of human life? The answer lies in returning to the balanced, grounded roots of traditional Advaita Vedanta. Traditional teachers recognized something crucial that, modern spiritual culture often forgets. There are actually two levels to reality that must be held at the same time. First, there is the absolute truth, Paramarthika, the ultimate reality, where pure awareness is unchanging and non-dual. And then there is the transactional reality, Vyavaharika, the empirical, relative world where human bodies exist, relationships matter, ethics apply, and, economic and political systems have real consequences on real people. Traditional Advaita never used the absolute truth to, dismiss the transactional world. It understood that as long as you are breathing, eating, and living in a body, you operate in the relative world, and that world honestly requires ethics, compassion, and action. Furthermore, traditional non-duality insisted on prerequisites before jumping into radical truth. In Advaita Vedanta, this is called sadhana chatushtaya, the fourfold qualifications of a seeker, viveka, or discernment, which is knowing the difference between what is permanent and what is temporary. Vairagya, or dispassion, meaning emotional maturity and freedom from compulsive, selfish cravings. Shatka sampati, or inner discipline, which is all about cultivating a quiet mind, emotional resilience, forbearance, and focus. And finally, mumukshutvam, a burning desire for genuine liberation from limitation. Notice that none of these prerequisites encourage isolating yourself or pretending you don't need human connection. Instead, they refine your mind so that you can live in the world with clarity, humility, and strength. When traditional non-duality is properly integrated, it provides, really, the exact antidote to the hyper-individualism of our modern political climate. It reminds us that true self-realization does not mean becoming an isolated island of inner peace. It means recognizing that because there is no fundamental separation between you and the rest of existence, caring for others is simply caring for yourself. You don't have to choose between personal responsibility and collective care. You don't have to pretend that systemic issues don't exist in order to be spiritually evolved. Real spiritual maturity is not about escaping the world or optimizing an isolated self. It is about realizing that we are deeply interconnected and taking loving, wise, and grounded action within the world we share.